You are standing in a Miami suburb in 1985. A homeowner opens their front door to find a 5-foot lizard draped across the porch railing. The animal is eating the flowering shrubs methodically. It will not leave. Now, here is what almost nobody told them back then. This creature had no business being in Florida at all. I have spent 23 years tracking iguanas across South Florida, studying how they got here and what they cost us. My mentor in the 1990s was a herpetologist named David Bartlett, who watched this invasion unfold from its very first years. By the time I entered this field, the problem was already far too large to see all at once. What I want to show you today is how a handful of escaped pets became millions in just 50 years. And stay with me, because near the end, I will tell you about the one predator everyone missed, the predator that actually worked. It is the opposite of what the wildlife agencies spent decades hunting for. Here is how it began. The late 1960s, Miami-Dade County. Green iguanas, iguana, arrived in crates marked exotic pets from Central America and the Caribbean. A few animals escaped. More were released by owners who realized a 6-foot lizard eats constantly and bites. Florida's climate was perfect. Warm year-round, frost-free in the south. The iguanas did not just survive, they thrived. By the 1980s, they were everywhere in South Florida, and people barely noticed. A female iguana lays 25 to 71 eggs per clutch, multiple times in a single year. That is exponential growth in a subtropical paradise with no natural enemies. They ate the native plants. They burrowed under canal banks, collapsing them. They swam across open water and settled the Florida Keys, where the warmth never stops. By 2010, estimates were already climbing into the hundreds of thousands. Today, there are over 1 million green iguanas in South Florida. But the numbers alone do not tell you what this cost the land. The real damage runs much deeper than a counting problem. What happens when a single invader reshapes every plant, every burrow, every food chain at once? Now that you know how fast they arrived, you need to see what they actually ate. I stand in a Miami-Dade botanical garden where iguanas used to pass through regularly. One plant here is Knickerbean, Caesalpinia, and it was nearly stripped bare. The Miami blue butterfly, one of Florida's rarest, lays its eggs only on this plant. When the iguanas came, they ate the new shoots before the butterflies could breed. An insect that survived for 10,000 years began to vanish in a single decade. This is not a fringe loss. It is a documented cascade I have traced myself. You are standing in a gopher-tortoise burrow system near Naples, Florida. Watch the entrance, a hole about 6 inches across, excavated by an animal that has been here for millennia. These burrows shelter over 350 other species during their lifetimes. But when iguana density climbed above 10 per acre in the 2000s, something shifted. The tortoises found their foraging grounds already grazed down to bare soil. The iguanas were eating the same fruits, the same tender shoots, the same seeds. A keystone species, one whose collapse threatens an entire foundation, began to retreat. Here is what most people miss about herbivory at scale. It does not just strip the plant, it removes the seed, the next generation, the cover. Without native plants to hold the soil, erosion accelerates across canal banks and levees. I have measured soil loss increase by 2 feet per year, in high iguana zones. The South Florida Water Management District reported that iguana burrows undermined seawalls designed to hold back storm surge. This matters because one breached levee during a hurricane can flood tens of thousands of homes. The female iguana produces 20 to 70 eggs multiple times per year without pause. South Florida's subtropical climate means no winter slow, no hibernation, no rest. While a native raccoon or red-tailed hawk hunts a few juveniles, the nest still swells. By the 2010s, the system had overwhelmed itself. No native predator, no constraint, 1 million iguanas. The agencies knew the problem existed, but every tool they tried moved too slowly. And here is where the story takes its turn. With Florida's agencies overwhelmed and millions of iguanas breeding unchecked, I had to ask a harder question. What was actually stopping them from breeding even faster? I went back to the data from 2010 onwards, the years when we should have seen iguana numbers climb even steeper. They didn't. Something changed, but it wasn't the snakes or the alligators everyone assumed were doing the work. You are standing at an iguana nesting site in Miami-Dade County in May, watching a female dig into the soft sand along a canal bank. She lays her eggs, 40 of them, sometimes more, and walks away. The eggs are abandoned, totally undefended, for 90 to 120 days. Here is where it gets interesting. When researchers dug up those nests to count survivors, they found something unexpected. Entire clutches were gone. Not scattered, not partially eaten, completely consumed, often in just days. The culprit was not a big predator. It was an army of 250,000 workers, each the size of a sesame seed. The fire ant, Solenopsis invicta, an invasive from South America, like the iguana itself. Fire ants found iguana eggs like I find ripe fruit. They taste the burrow entrance, recruit the colony, and overwhelm the nest completely. A single fire ant colony can contain 500,000 workers and attack a nest in coordinated waves. The venom in their stings, alkaloid compounds called solenopsin, is lethal to hatchlings the size of a pencil. And here is the part that changed my whole picture of the problem. Iguana hatchlings have no defense. None. In their native range, fire ant pressure was never strong enough to matter. Evolution didn't prepare them. For 20 years, I have watched invasive species, but this was the first time I saw one invasive suppress another by accident. The fire ant was not strategically placed. It spread on its own, but it was erasing hatchlings faster than females could replace them. By 2015, juvenile iguana sightings across South Florida had dropped nearly 40% compared to the peak breeding years. This is the force agencies never factored into their models. But understanding how it works is only half the answer. The real question is why this happens where it does, and what happens next when you know where to look. So, fire ants are ravaging the clutches, juvenile sightings are down 40%, and wildlife agencies have spent millions. And here is where the story takes its sharpest turn. The real predator was not the fire ant. It was not a snake. It was not an alligator. It was cold. I mean this literally. A cold snap. You are standing in Miami in early January 2010. The temperature drops to 41 degrees Fahrenheit and holds for 3 days. Iguanas are ectotherms. They cannot make their own heat. When the air turns cold, their blood slows, their muscles freeze, and they simply fall out of the trees. By January 10th, the ground in Miami was carpeted with immobile iguanas. Some were already dead. Others were barely breathing. That single cold event killed tens of thousands in days. No trapping program, no bounty, no fire ant had ever moved a population number like that. And it happened again. January 2020, another hard freeze. Then, January 2022, each time, the same mechanism. Cold air dips down from the Arctic. Temperatures plummet below 50 degrees. Iguanas lose the ability to thermoregulate, and the population crashes. Here is what I have learned after 23 years studying this invasion. We were fighting the wrong fight. Agencies spent millions on removal when the climate was already doing the suppression work. But, and this is the honest part, cold snaps are not reliable. An iguana population that survives warm winters will explode. The female still lays 40 to 70 eggs per clutch, multiple times a year. In 3 warm winters, the population rebounds. So we have stumbled onto a cycle, not a solution. Look at what we have walked through. Exotic pets in the 1960s, a population that colonized 1 million strong, an ecosystem stripped of native plants, fire ants destroying nests, juvenile recruitment collapsing, and underneath it all, one force that mattered most. Now, when you look at a South Florida weather forecast in January, you are watching an iguana population control event unfold in real time. But here is what troubles me. If winter temperatures rise because of warming trends, that cold snap mechanism weakens. Warmer winters mean faster recovery. Faster recovery means management must scale up dramatically or surrender ground to the invasion. What have you noticed about iguanas where you live? Are they more common in warm years, less common after cold ones? I read every comment, and I want to hear your winter observations. Because the future of Florida's ecosystem may depend on understanding that cycle where you stand.